What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Appalachian Eclectic. I'm Aaron, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make an epoxy mold. You're going to hear some noises in the background. That's because it's really nasty outside, raining, and Copper and Maggie are full of energy. So they'll probably randomly be popping up throughout this video. Speak of the devil. Here's my Copper. Thank you, buddy. All right, so what are we going to be making a mold of? Well, I have this piece of walnut here, you can see, and what this was, when I started turning it, I wasn't sure how bad this damage was. So this was all termite damage here, where the log had set for a long time. So I went ahead and rough turned the bowl and had a piece break off. And what we're going to do is we are going to make a mold. We are going to make a mold so we can fill all this empty space with epoxy, and then when I put it back on the lathe and return it, everywhere that the wood is missing in these areas for the bowl will now look like epoxy. It gives a really cool effect. Plus, one of the things I really like about it is, like, this piece of walnut definitely wouldn't have made as big of a bowl, and really probably almost worth nothing more than a firewood because of how bad it is. But with the epoxy, I'm going to be able to salvage it and still make something beautiful. All right, so I'm going to round up a couple of our extra supplies and we're going to get started with step one. Okay, so there's a few things you're going to need to get started on a mold, and this is for a bowl, yes, but the basic premise for making an epoxy mold is about the same. I made a lot of them, one of the things I'm pretty good at, and I'm going to be using poster board that I get real cheap, Tyvek tape, because it's cheap and it does an excellent job of sticking and stuff, and it's easy to form, hot glue gun, and some caulk. All right, so that's what we're going to need for the basis of our mold. So the first thing I'm going to do is get one piece here of my poster board. Let me adjust the camera so everybody can see better. All right, so now that you can see the piece instead of me a little bit better, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my blank here, and this will also be whatever object you choose to use. And this one's really big. If it was going to be something small, I'd cut the poster board, but I'm going to go ahead and just leave the poster board full size since it is so big. And so the poster board, because I don't want to make a mess and I'm using casting resin, it takes a long time to dry. The poster board might soak through with the epoxy and make a little bit more of a mess. So one of the things I like about the Tyvek tape is that the epoxy doesn't really like to adhere to it, but it also is waterproof. All right, so now I have a good surface here that will adhere, the caulk will adhere to, and the hot glue will adhere to extremely well as nothing's going to soak through and make a mess. So next I'm going to make my sides, and I'm just going to make it a little bit taller than this bowl and cut some strips so that we can get started actually forming our mold. All right, so now we've got all the pieces for our mold. And this does take, it doesn't take too long. It took me about 10, 15 minutes maybe. But it's the cheapest way I found. There are other ways, mold making materials and stuff you can get. This is the most inexpensive and, more importantly, most reliable way I've found. I have good results doing it every way this time. Plus, it's more inexpensive. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take and set our bowl here, and we're going to mark just the general area around, because we want to make sure we have enough room. So now, all right, so our next step for this, and this wouldn't apply if you weren't using like a lathe, making a bowl and taking all, going to be taking material out. But the epoxy is not cheap. It's pretty expensive, and you can see this void here would take a whole lot, and the void's under here. And all we're going to be doing would make the bowl. This is all going to be coming back out anyway, so it would just be wasted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take sticks here, and we're going to cut them up. I'm going to take my hot glue gun, and we are going to build up all this area. I know the bowl's going to be here, so we're going to fill as much of this up and as much of these areas under here up as we can with scrap wood, and then that will take a lot less epoxy, and the scrap wood's going to be getting turned away anyway. So basically taking a little extra time to save some money and hopefully still get a really good product. All right, so you can see here I've got piles of lots of little scrap I cut up, and we are going to get started. The first thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to secure the bowl. Because this is wood, and even though it's a heavy piece, the epoxy has a pretty high viscosity, and so pieces will tend to float. So you don't want it floating out of the epoxy, because it'll make a mess and it wastes a lot of wood and epoxy. So I'm gonna go ahead and super glue the main bowl down, and then we're gonna hot glue, and then we are going to fill up inside this void with big blocks, little blocks, basically fill up as much of the empty space as we can under here and inside here, and that is going to let us use less epoxy. Well, here we go. Alright, so we got all our wood in here. You see it looks pretty crazy, but this is, this is all going to be coming out when I put it on the lathe. So it doesn't really matter what it looks like. So now I'm just going to go and put my side pieces around. Alright, now that I've got everything taped up, fairly tight fit with just a little bit of room around the edges, first thing I want to do is take my hot glue gun. I'm just going to go around the outside here. Now, I want to warn you guys, this hot glue is not going to be my main sealant. Hot glue will somehow find little pinholes and bubbles, and the epoxy will find its way out. So we're going to hot glue, and that's going to be for the strength. Then we're going to use silicone caulk and go back around it to make our waterproof seal. so we have our hot glue. You can see this forms a lot stronger now. This is actually really strong with the super glue, the sides tape, and we're just going to give a little extra protection here with some silicone caulk. Go back around the bottom. The sides are pretty good, and get this where we can not worry about it leaking at all. All right, so you see I put a massive bead of caulk on here so that I could really spread it up and down and not have to worry about any leaks. So now we're gonna let this sit for about 2 hours, 3 hours, till the caulk I know is nice and set up and hard. And we're going to start mixing our epoxy to pour it. All right, everybody, so we have dogs. They've been outside to play and they're still a little bit antsy. But now I think we're ready to pour our resin. So I'm gonna go grab our resin. I've had it in the sink warming up. This makes it a lot easier to put the bottles in a bowl or a sink of hot water, and it thins it down a little bit, makes it much easier to pour. So I'm gonna go grab that and then we'll get started. All right, so our resin's warmed up, it's thinned down a little bit, and we're ready to get started. Now I've got a 2-quart pot here. I'm not sure how much it's gonna take, probably most of what I've got here. Probably gonna take a gallon or more. Hopefully I have enough, I think I do. But I'm using deep pour resin, casting resin, because it takes a lot longer to harden. It takes a couple days. This does a few things. One, it's going to soak into the wood and everything's going to bond. It's also going to help with air bubbles. Because it's so thin, it's going to give the air bubbles time to rise. And I'll show you a way that I found works pretty well to help minimize any air bubbles. Also have to use a deep pour resin because we're going to be pouring really thick. And just honestly, I'm probably going to pour about 2 or 3 inches. I'm going to let that completely cure, and then I'll pour some more. Not sure, I haven't decided yet. We'll see what happens. I'm using a combination of mica powders and alcohol inks. And I'm just going to kind of play with it and put some different colors. This should be a pretty cool texture. Now you always want to mix your hardener part B into your part A. So put your part A first. And since I know that I'm going to be mixing probably a couple pours, I'm going to mark my containers here, part A and part B. That way I can reuse those and just save a little extra money. All right, so we've got our first batch mixed here, and I don't really have I just kind of eyeball this. So I like my base color with alcohol dyes just because it gives a nice blend. And then just for a little extra shine and some sparkle and interest, we're going to add a couple different colors of our blue mica powder here. I want this, since the walnut was pretty dark, I really want it kind of dark. And as we go, I'm going to mix it lighter. As I continue to mix batches to pour in here, I'm gonna mix it lighter and lighter and lighter. So I wanna make sure this gets mixed up really, really well. All right, so you can see how cool that looks with those different colors of mica powder in there and swirled. So now we've just got to pour into our mold here. I'm gonna start here in the center. One reason I like this, this epoxy is much thinner than like tabletop epoxy. And so I want everything to get down into cracks. And a lot of these cracks run all the way through the center. And so it's just going to take a little while pouring very patiently so that this will make sure and work down in all these small cracks. And I think I was right I don't think I'm gonna have enough, but now we're just gonna go ahead and keep mixing and get this finished up. All right, so I missed the mark a little bit. You can see on my my amount, but luckily I have some more epoxy ordered, and honestly it works out better because I wanted to I really didn't want to pour this all at once because it would have created just a whole lot of heat and would have set up too fast. You see, it's still, you know, it's a couple hours after I poured it, and it's still super thin. It's going to take a couple days. Maggie. I told you guys I was going to show you a way that I help control air bubbles, and that's, I've got the sander the pad broke off of, and so I just set this on here. You can actually see the air bubbles moving to the top from the vibration. And that's pretty much it as far as the bubble control. So I'll just keep doing that for the next couple days, probably till, well, tonight when I go to bed. And that will really going to help pull a lot of the bubbles up to the top. Plus, with this being so thin, it takes a long time to set up, so it's not as bad as normal epoxy. All right, guys. Well, I know everybody thought they were going to get to see this finished today. That was never my intention. This video was about making the mold more than anything else, and so like I said, you can use this for pretty much anything. If you wanted, you know, clear epoxy or whatever, this mold works really well. Pretty inexpensive, easy to use, and pretty consistent. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this video. You're going to want to make sure and like, subscribe, and share, because you're not going to get to see the rest if you don't want to miss it. So that's going to wrap up this video. We got some other projects coming up, and part 2 of this, where we actually turn this bowl and see what it's going to look like, will be coming up probably next week. So really looking forward to it. Wish I'd had more epoxy than I did. I thought I had another couple gallons sitting downstairs, but I do not. Oh well, Amazon, it'll be here in 2 days. About the exact right time I need to pour this. All right, guys, thanks for watching.